Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Demand for lithium ion batteries is projected to be at 1.6 terawatt hours. Meanwhile, Chinese firms alone have announced that they will have about 6 terawatt hours of production capacity built by the end of this year. That is 3.5 times as much as global demand forecast, which already assumes optimized growth for the year. Of course, regions like Europe and North America have pledged big build-outs of their own on top of that too, which while smaller than China's, would still be able to cover most of global demand on their own. Now, importantly, plant capacity doesn't have to equal actual production. Many plants built out up end up failing even when they are built. Plants don't always work at 100% output, and companies often pledge more than they actually end up in building, especially when state subsidies are on the line. Chinese battery factories are almost running at just 51% capacity, that is, in 2022, and then at 43% capacity in 2023. So when they promise even more overcapacity going forward, that hardly seems out of character. Next section, failing battery prices and electric vehicle market shifts. As one might expect, prices have already started collapsing as a result, with Bloomberg reporting cell prices briefly hitting just $53 per kilowatt hour recently. That is, a price that they formerly projected that they would only reach in 2030 or by 2035, meaning that we might be 5 to 10 years ahead of the expected price curve. And with batteries making up somewhere between 22 to 40% of the value of an electric car, the resulting collapse in electric vehicle have started too. While we still pay for electric vehicles than their equivalent combustion engine counterparts in the West, in China, the opposite became true starting in 2022 already. Even before the various purchase subsidies from the government, and the electric car prices have only dropped since. Affordable models cost just $10,000 to $20,000, while a nice upper mid-range one like Xiaomi SU7, for example, just start at under $30,000. Unsurprisingly, then Chinese cities have an incredible high share of them. I have back to Shenzhen where I used to live many years to visit some friends and seeing the change here as pretty mind-blowing. Standing next to a massive street and not being completely drowned out by engine noise is definitely not how things used to be. And with a massive overcapacity driving prices down globally, next we can expect the same to start happening in the rest of the world soon too. Volkswagen, for example, recently started offering the electric ID.3 for just Euro 249 a month on leasing here in Germany, which is now significantly cheaper than Euros 400 or so that you have to pay for an equivalent Golf. While the price drop partially driven by Volkswagen having to meet government imposed EV quotas, the trend is there. And it is very likely that Chinese car companies could already set their electric cars in the West that would undercut combustion engine ones. Next section, how China became global superpower. So how did China become the global superpower in the batteries and electric vehicles? And can the rest of the world catch up too? Or should they even try? As the home of BYD, the country's largest electric car maker and the world's second biggest battery company, Shenzhen has embraced an electric future way faster than many others. When I left city some few years ago, electric taxis made by VVT were very common. The city, with a population of 18 million, actually completed its transition to 100% electric taxis and city buses around 3 to 4 years ago. While Shenzhen has been especially quick even for Chinese standards, the country as a whole reached to very 47% of the electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid sales already and is growing rapidly. Given that China is the largest car market in the world by far, handily outselling the US and the European Union, given that batteries are the most expensive component in electric vehicles, it's clear that just Chinese electric cars in China alone have already turned batteries into a huge business. Energy storage is now growing even faster than category of EVs, and we are looking a veritable battery boom. China, for example, more than quadrupled its battery fleet for energy storage in 2023 and passed policy mandates requiring wind and solar panels to install a certain range of storage. Meanwhile, batteries are now getting so cheap that even market players without government supports are starting huge build-outs of them, even in places such as Texas or Germany. In this $130 billion battery industry, China has increasingly become the undisputed leader. 6 out of the 10 biggest producers in the world are Chinese, including the two largest one by far, CATL and BYD. China dominates every single process, making the final cells, components, and upstream processes like mining and material refining. The energy storage market is completely dominated by Chinese firms whose big focus on low-cost LFP technologies and turned out to be a perfect match for this segment. Meanwhile, in electric vehicles, even brands outside of China, from Ford to Tesla and Volkswagen to BMW, have agreed that they have to buy at least large part of their batteries from Chinese suppliers. Some brands have gone even further. Volkswagen, for example, has bought shares in the local EV maker Xpeng and started co-developing whole cars with them. Mazda recently introduced an electric vehicle that is called as Mazda 6e, which turned out to be just a reskinned Chinese model, the Chang'an D-Pal L7, with some cosmetic tweaks and Mazda logos. It is clear that to anyone in the industry that China's dominance in battery and their associated dominance in electric vehicles is almost absolute. The rest of the world sort out of sleepwalked into a massive alliance with them. The next section, the sprint and the marathon strategy. China's biggest battery started in 2000, 3 years before Tesla was even founded and 8 to 12 years before the first proper EVs roll off production lines in the West. A man named Wang Gang, who studied in Germany and worked for Audi, proposed a bold strategy to the Chinese government embrace clean energy vehicles. The government took it seriously. Wang was brought back to China, researched the plan, and was appointed Minister of Science and Technology in 2007 to implement it. He identified 3 national challenges electric vehicles could solve. The first, severe urban air pollution that threatened public health and political stability. Second, dangerous reliance on foreign oil. 70 to 85% of the imports pass through vulnerable Strait of Malacca. Third, a persistent inability to catch up in traditional automotive tech. Next section, an industry the West ignored. In the early 2000s, batteries were seen as low margin, environmental risky, and irrelevant by the West. As manufacturing moved offshore, China doubled down on battery research and production with little global resistance. Simultaneously, Chinese car companies were dismissed due to their weak performance, outdated designs, and dependency on joint ventures with global players. Yet, while no one was watching, China sprinted ahead. Wang Gang was even invited to tour US labs and battery factories, openly learning from the West. China built battery and EV capabilities with full backing of the state, launching the taxi and bus electrification programs that created guaranteed demands. Next section, standardization and control. Subsidies for private EVs followed, with perks like instant green license plate, free parking, and priority lanes. A critical rule was introduced. Only electric vehicles with Chinese-made batteries could qualify. This led both foreign and local car markets to rely on Chinese suppliers. At the same time, firms like CATL and BYD acquired upstream assets, mines, refineries, and processors, ensuring cost control and global leverage. Before the rest of the world realized, China had completely battery supply chains, price control, and an EV ecosystem ready to scale. Next section, marathon phase. As Western automakers began slowly transitioning, China had already begun its marathon phase. Government stability and policy certainty gave rise to over 200 EV brands. Intense competition led to innovation in every segment. Tiny urban runabouts, SUVs with battery swaps, luxury minivans, and even jumping hypercars. Charging infrastructure, often seen as a bottleneck in the West, exploded in China. Automakers built proprietary networks. In Shenzhen, find chargers from Xpeng, Zeekr, NIO, and more side by side. Next section, global reaction and missed opportunities. Western automakers have lagged due to legacy business concern, labor resistance, and political caution. Their electric vehicles are pricier and often less exciting and hamstrung by sparse charging networks. However, in China has continued racing. In 2024, EV sales in Europe dropped 3% due to policy reversals. USA growth is now at risk too, but China alone posted 40% growth, driving the world's 25% EV expansion rate. Next section, China EV export surge. Chinese EV makers are expanding aggressively into the Southeast Asia, South America, and Africa. Thailand, long dominated by Japanese brand, is flipping. Local drivers prefer Chinese EVs due to affordability and quality. Government welcome Chinese factory to replace Japanese ones. Other developing nations may follow, while countries such as Turkey, Brazil are resisting with tariffs, including dissent by USA. China bets that its cost advantage and early dominance will eventually wear them down. Next, overcapacity as a weapon. Overcapacity is China's economic weapon. It is not just about meeting domestic demand, it's about flooding to the global market, undercutting foreign rivals, and turning battery production scale into geopolitical leverage. Volkswagen, once dominated in China, has lost massive ground. Its EV lineup failed to compete. Tesla too has slipped to just 2.9% of the market. China is the first major battlefield and legacy brands are losing. Final thoughts. For much of the world, China's EV dominance arrived suddenly, but for China, it was 2 decades plan, executed with precision, vision, and long-term backing. The genie is out of the bottle. Catching up will take more than money. It will take a strategic rethinking of entire industries are built. That's all for today. Thank you and see you in the next video.